much is new. How'd you find this place? Did someone suggest it to you? Or
Natural Market, the owner there, Pharma, she mentioned it to me, so I just checked it out, so
Nice.
kind of like this room.
Yeah, this is cool. Nice vaulted ceilings.
Anthony, do you mind me asking, did you have a personal run-in with the pharma world?
Yeah, I'm gonna get my story in the beginning, so I'll go through that for sure. Let's get it. Alright, so today we're talking about big pharma, functional medicine, how to stay sane in an insane world. Now, the reason why I chose these topics is for many reasons, but big pharma especially is not necessarily what we think it is in terms of health and wellness. A lot of people are just not getting the results that they want. So that's where the other side of it is going to be functional medicine. Now this is like basically the whole systems approach. So it's not just taking into like supplements. A lot of people go to supplements, which they have their point, but it's more so about foundational health, certain principles, of course, nutrition, sleep, exercise, and then we're going to do something called elemental health today, which is a whole other facet of things. Basically how to optimize the elements. We got air, water, light, sunlight, and vision more than that. And so when it comes to staying sane in an insane world, this is about being empowered within ourselves to know what we want, to know where we're going, and to have a sense of direction. Because especially the past few years, we know there's been nothing but disempowerment, nothing but propping up a victimhood as a strength. But we understand that the power's not outside of us, all right? The power is actually within us. And if we can understand that, then that's what true freedom is. So, free your mind. I'm gonna get into how I got up here in the first place. So, I had Lyme disease for about 6 years, okay? Now, I've experienced every symptom that you can possibly imagine, everything from the joints, from heart issues, a lot of fibromyalgia type things. And basically, I was disabled for a number of years. I couldn't do much of anything, honestly. And just through my own journey, I got into somewhat big pharma, but I had a strong mind for that, so I kind of quickly understood this is not the path. Big pharma, they have their place, like for emergency situations, of course, you don't want to neglect that. But when it comes to optimizing your health, their doctors are just not necessarily informed about that. I won't get into that, of course. But basically, on my journey, it was more so about progress. So getting better every day, just learning new things, making new connections with certain people, learning about nutrition, sleep, exercise, all these things that we just kind of have on default in our lives until we get sick. And most of us don't even understand that we can get well. And it's not until we hit rock bottom, which happens for many of us who got into space in the first place. That's when we understand that we have to take the power into our own hands. Our doctor is more so should be a coach. All right, they should be advising us, giving us guidance, but a lot of us kind of had a strange parental relationship with our doctor, and it shouldn't really be like that. They have their place for sure, but getting out of that took a process of 6 years. And after healing myself with the help of many other people, now I'm out on fire because I understand what it's like to not feel well. I understand what it's like to be sick, not do what you want, being disempowered, all these things, making it to the total opposite of that. And now where I definitely know who I am, I know my purpose, know what I want, know where I'm going, and I'm healthy as I can be. always learning more and starting podcasts and all these types of things that just expand the mission, because my mission is to help people become the greatest versions of themselves. Because when we become the greatest version of ourselves, then we can influence the world on a much higher level. So expanding beyond that is focused on a mission, being mission oriented, and that's how I got here. Alright, so from the top, behind the scenes of Big Pharma. So there's a lot of tactics that like Big Pharma uses. I want to distinguish real quick between doctors and Big Pharma, because there is a big difference. Big Pharma is like the industry that all of these things play into. Right? It's kind of information that is in the studies, information that is funded by the media, funded by like all these institutions, regulatory agencies. Big Pharma has their tentacles basically in all these. And the doctors, they get into space from a true place that they want to help all people, for the most part. Like, they're not bad people, they want to get into this space to help people. But the problem is, when you teach a smart person the wrong thing, they become world class at doing the wrong thing. So, we have education that there's something called drug ropes. So they use something called detailing. Now detailing is this process of basically taking the doctors out to lunch, buying them fancy things, having them speak at certain events so they can have this relationship with the doctor, so they prescribe their drugs from Big Pharma. So the drug reps go to the doctor and have all these strange situations. So the doctor can be like, yes, I want to prescribe a drug to my patients. That's called detailing. Now lobbying, this is basically government involvement, where we have like many of the congressmen that are paid off by Big Pharma to say certain things. I mean, there's like well over 80% of the congressmen in the United States are funded by Big Pharma. They received a check from Big Pharma in 2020. And there's a very long history of that. And in terms of the marketing, so what we don't understand is that America and New Zealand, these are the only two countries in the world that allow commercials for drugs. Like, this is not done in any other place in the world. So this was back in the 70s. That's when it kind of became normalized, right? And the issue with that is like, it's all the time. Like, I just kind of laugh at it. You got these like 30 seconds worth of benefits and like 3 minutes worth of these side effects, you know, like 1.5 speed, right? And it's like, why are we getting this messaging? Like, it's all the time. You got the people in the boats, they ride, they have a great time, but they don't know, maybe liver cancer from the drug. So, something to be mindful of. So, corruption and crime. What I mean by this. So, Pfizer, for example, they've been rewarded the #1 fine in terms of criminal penalties by the Department of Justice at $2.1 billion for fraudulent marketing. They have countless examples of this. They have there's a drug called Prinpro, right? So this is where this is a drug that gave many women breast cancer, and they kind of had this amazing legal team that covers up all these things that they know of. Another one is called Vioxx. So the drug had been studied for cardiac events, right? So now the drug reps, they knew this, but with their powerful marketing team, they put it on the market anyways, and ended up killing 60,000 people. And guess what happened? By the way, in any drug case, there's never been anyone who went to jail. All they do is pay these tiny fines. They make billions off the drug and make hundreds of millions in fines, which is really nothing to them. They make all this money, and as they still slap on the wrist. And this is why it continues, and nothing really serious happens to them. So, another thing is like, Pfizer, they've been caught illegally experimenting with drugs on Nigerian children. Like, there's countless things that we just don't, because here's the thing, the media is funded by Big Pharma. So why would we have these drug cases on the media that are explaining these things when they're paying their bills? It just doesn't make any logical sense. So we got Big Pharma funding the media. So if you hear something, it's here today, gone today. And this is just some of the things that we hear about. Because like I said, they have the most powerful legal team in the world. They get away with all these things. And nobody really understands that. So it's really about being mindful and protecting our minds against, all the media, all the things. So basically we can feel more power in that sense. We're going to circle back at some point to that. Okay, so back to the regulatory agencies. So the FDA, we talk about the most, it's kind of most prominent. So again, FDA is funded by Big Pharma, which we'll get to. So the FDA, some history on that. In the beginning, it had some amazing things. Like it did some great things, and still does today. But there's some things that happen down the line. Like I said, there was something called user fees. Now, at the advent of user fees, this kind of allowed certain things like we know of, like say vinegar or water or salt. Basically, these things didn't have to get a standard of approval by the FDA because it's just basic things to speed things up, right? So what the drug things did is they kind of did the exact same thing with the drugs. So there's something called grass, were generally recognized as safe, so like vinegar, salt, But what this allowed in the system is now Big Pharma is funding the FDA. And guess what happened after that? The amount of drugs that were disapproved by the FDA from Big Pharma dramatically went down. It's not because they're having more drugs funded within the system. It's because the system itself was being funded by Big Pharma. So another thing on that is that the food system is also funding the FDA. So we got, things like, can't believe it's not butter. We got, Coke, all the processed food companies that are basically having the say in the same system. And it should not be like that. Like it used to be funded by the taxpayers, people like us. And when it's funded by the people, then it works for the people. When it's funded by Big Pharma, another thing is it works by a revolving door. So the FDA and the Big Pharma, they exchange employees. Like many times when they stop working at one, they start working at the other. So there's cross-play. And there's something called post hoc payment. So what happens with that is the drug reps, when the FDA, when they get together, the drug, Big Pharma pays the FDA, certain members of the FDA, a check for approving the drug like 6 months after. It's kind of like this low-key thing, like do it on the table. We'll do it 6 months after. Nobody will notice. It's illegal. It's called bribing. You can't pay somebody to approve your drug. This happens all the time. The education. So when we look at the studies in the research, like say journals for example, again journals are funded by Big Pharma. We have an issue because when we look at research, there's something called a summary, like an abstract, right? So the thing with an abstract and the summary is that this discrepancy between the doctors and Big Pharma is this. The drug companies themselves are giving the summary of the data to the doctors. For the most part, doctors don't have time to read research, contrary to popular belief. They're not sitting and reading studies. They have Big Pharma feeding them knowledge from their own studies, internal studies, because the FDA does not research the products. They get the information from Big Pharma, so it's kind of like grade your own homework type of shit. And we got, I was talking about the education. So the education of Big Pharma and the Big Food as a whole. Big Food funds the education for the universities. So when we talk about, nutritionists going to school who don't know shit about nutrition because they are funded by I Can't Believe It's Not Butter. I did an interview with somebody who was behind the scenes of this all day. Her name is Michelle Hearn. So she was a dietitian, she was practicing for many years, and basically she found out that everything like in the traditional university is funded by processed food companies in terms of nutrition. So the food pyramid with whole grains in the bottom is funded by General Mills. We got I Can't Believe It's Not Butter, all the nonsense funding the information. So that's why the food pyramid is the way it is and whatnot. So back to interpreting the research. Because the summary is often different from the data that we actually get in the studies. Like we talk about Vioxx, for example, circling back to that, they had, with the cardiac events, but they didn't put out a summary. Big Pharma, everything's good. Because the doctor thought it was good, but it wasn't. 60,000 people died. So let's get to some solutions to the other side of that. Before we do that, I'm going to talk briefly about the history of Big Pharma and Western medicine itself, because this is going to blow people's minds, but we don't understand. Because in the early 1900s, we had like natural health, functional medicine, all these things were at the forefront. This is what the majority of the people did. Now it's obviously flip-flop these days. Well, how did that happen? So, John D. Rockefeller, of course, at the time, this is where all like the vitamins were being discovered, the minerals, all these types of things were like have these breakthrough scientific discoveries. And then what Rockefeller discovered is that these drugs can be run by petroleum. So, of course, he created something called the Flexner Report. Now, the Flexner Report, this is basically where they hired a man named Abraham Flexner. He's not a doctor, no affiliation to the medical system. He went around to all the schools, the naturopathic schools. He basically wrote this report on why they should not be around, they should be closed, or why it's quackery, all this nonsense. And so they had this report, and Rockefeller paid the industry $100 million, which is way more 100 years ago than it is now, to basically shut down all the schools. They basically had to kind of bribe the doctors, because it's kind of hard to change people's minds at the time. They had a system that was now churning out doctors who knew nothing about nutrition, only about drugs, prescribing things, and then it has its place. But in no way, shape, or form should we be a drug-first society where we have an issue. It must mean that we need to take something. And that's a lot of things that people need to come to grips with. The doctors, they're not taught that. They're not taught how the industry started. They're just, it's normal. You just kind of accept things as normal, right? So, what is the new approach? We talk about functional medicine, taking back our power, and I talk about getting a functional medicine that's about basically it's a systems approach. So everything is connected. We have the digestive system, the nervous system, the endocrine system, right, and all the systems, and everything works into each other. Instead of isolating our bodies into parts, we have this system, we're all like they're kind of separate. They're not intertwined. But when you look at drugs, basically, another thing with drugs is that they come from plants, they come from herbs, they come from nature. But what they do is they chemically isolate them, and they alter the compounds in them, so they become a little more powerful in certain ways. But now we are left with all these side effects. The thing is, they're not really side effects, they're direct effects, because everything is connected. So, with functional medicine, it understands that it has a heavy emphasis on testing, by the way. So it has a lot of testing because there's a lot of errors that go on with diagnostics in terms of conventional medicine. They do a good job kind of with diagnostics, but it's a lot of, let's say, inaccurate testing. Say example for the thyroid, I'll circle back to that. But taking everything into account, like what is this person's state of health? What is this person's state of mind? What are they able to do within their own bodies? Nutrition, sleep, exercise, relationships, so on, right? And then if you have like a digestive issue, throwing in targeted supplements to heal up the gut, because it works on healing the body rather than treating it like something that is just broken for the rest of your life and you just got to maintain it. But the body is designed to heal itself. We're designed to be healthy. Sickness is unfortunately the norm today, and it should be the opposite. And that's why I do what I do, to try to get back to that. Because health is really freedom at a foundation. Alright, so let's get into some first principles of nutrition. Because when we want to master anything, it really comes down to the basics usually. So, of course, eat real food, eat organic, local, seasonal. So, what does that mean, real food? So we talk about nuts, grains, seeds, legumes, meat, vegetables, fruit, like all things that we've been in contact with for hundreds of thousands of years. Even within that, just because it's a real food, doesn't mean it's right for you. We have to honor our own bodies, honor our state of health. Like grains may not be for everybody, but some people, depending on how you prepare them, depending on, again, state of health, like may be good for you. Depends on you. So that's about personalization. There's no one size fits all diet. So organic, that pesticides, herbicides, fungicides, rodenticides, the suffix side means to kill. So it's designed to kill things that are smaller than us. So pests, all these things, it kills them. But the thing about that is that we have to keep in mind we're made up of these tiny microorganisms called the microbiome. And there's some crazy research on this and how it dramatically affects our microbiome, in some ways acting like an antibiotic. Not direct parallel, but it does definitely impact that. So the main way that these things work is by being neurogenic or estrogenic. So essentially disrupting the nervous system or the endocrine system. So it can't reproduce, things like that, and just getting this whole host of array of side effects that come with that. And a lot of these are cut out by red tape. Like a lot of these are, so many of these are banned in other countries. So there's a lot here, like glyphosate, for example, it's banned in many places in Europe. So keeping that in mind, and then local and seasonal, that's about like eating with the land provided. When we think about our ancestors, they couldn't just get food shipped across from the world. It's kind of the luxury we have today. But we had to eat with the land provided, whether it was animals, whether it was vegetable, whatever it was. So, and the thing about that is when we get food shipped from across the world, is that it starts to lose nutrients. Like as soon as like a broccoli picked, it's going to start to lose nutrients that day. So the most local we can, like eating at farmers markets, things like that, is going to be most beneficial in terms of nutrient density. And seasonally, like our microbiome, we're going to talk about the genes in our microbiome shift about 25% season to season. So going back to nature, right? Different foods are going to be produced certain times of the year, certain seasons, and we eat for the microbiome. So focusing on incorporating certain seasonal foods during that time of year is going to be a little bit of a level up in our health. So again, not perfect. This is not the world that was hundreds of thousands of years ago, so we have to do certain things a little bit differently. But just trying to get back to nature as much as we can to do us a lot of benefit. And real quick, even according to like the genetics in your ancestry, like if you